Today, I came to bring you a gift for the baby. I heard from an acquaintance about a really good formula, so I bought some for your child.
My mother-in-law handed me the formula right after I gave birth. She always assumed that I married my husband, Rick, for his money, so she constantly harassed me. Seeing her smile and offer me a gift felt strange and suspicious.
I hope your baby grows up strong.
She left without saying anything snarky, which was eerie. Feeling puzzled, I showed the formula to my mom, who had come to visit me at home. Her face turned pale.
Don't open it. Throw it away, quick.
Then, my mom rushed to the police station with the formula in her hand.
Please examine this powder. I think it's not actually formula.
I was stunned and felt my mind go blank at what my mom reported to the police. My name is Alyssa, and I'm a preschool teacher. Spending time every day with adorable kids is a joy, but I've been really busy due to the chronic labor shortage. At that time, I met my husband Rick. Rick was a police officer who came to the preschool where I work to teach the kids about traffic safety. Apparently, every year, they get the police to help teach the kids the rules of the road before they enter elementary school, and it's usually a job for the new officers. Rick, who was young and full of a sense of justice, was popular among the preschool teachers, and I also thought he was a great guy. Rick gave me his contact info, and when I responded, that's how our relationship started. I fell for his masculine demeanor, and we began dating. We got married a year later. I was happy with my marriage to Rick, who was serious about his work and helped around the house too. Though people envied me, I also had my challenges. It was the relationship with my mother-in-law. She seemed to think that I only married Rick because he was a government employee, and she didn't seem to think well of me. I realized this the second time I went to visit my in-laws. We went to discuss the wedding, and we ended up having a meal together. I headed to the kitchen to help my mother-in-law, Michelle, but then she said something shocking to me.
You know, even a dummy like you can live comfortably by cozying up to a government employee.
Huh? What do you mean by that?
Being a preschool teacher is a job even idiots can do, right? The pay's not that great, and I bet you were worried about your future, but you'll be fine now that you're married to Rick, the cop.
I was stunned at what my mother-in-law said as she glared at me. I never married Rick because he was a government employee. No matter how many times I tried to explain that I married him because I was drawn to his character, my mother-in-law wouldn't listen.
You might be fooling Rick, but you won't fool me.
I was so shocked that I couldn't move. From then on, every time I went to my in-laws' house, my mother-in-law would make sarcastic comments. Since our homes were nearby, I see her about once a week, sometimes more often. It was painful each time, but since Rick got along well with his mom, I tried to endure it without saying much. About 6 months after our wedding, I found out I was pregnant. Rick was genuinely thrilled, and I was on cloud 9. There was another thing I was happy about with my pregnancy. I didn't have to see my mother-in-law for a while. When my morning sickness was bad, and I couldn't manage the housework, I asked my mom to come and help me out. My mother-in-law also offered to help, but I asked Rick to politely decline because I wouldn't be able to relax with her around. Rick understood my feelings and ensured his mom didn't come over. Previously, I was often invited to my in-laws just because we lived close by, so not having to see her was a relief. However, the distance from my mother-in-law lasted only until my pregnancy stabilized. My mother-in-law contacted me, saying they had harvested some veggies from my father-in-law's hobby garden and asked me to come over and get them. Rick was supposed to come with me, but he couldn't make it due to work, so I had to go alone. When I arrived at my in-laws' place, my father-in-law George welcomed me and packed a bag full of fresh veggies.
These are grown without pesticides, so they're good for you. Eat lots for the baby's sake.
I was so grateful for his kindness and thanked him. And then, just as I was about to leave, I was about to step down the front stairs when someone suddenly pushed me from behind. I twisted my body desperately to protect my belly and slid down the stairs, hitting my shoulder. It was just about 4 steps, but since they were tiled, I scraped my shoulder and elbow. When I looked up through the intense pain, my mother-in-law was smirking at me.
Ow, what a shame.
She said just that one thing as she went back inside, disappointed that I hadn't hurt my belly. Until now, her harassment had just been verbal, but if it got any worse, it might become a life-threatening issue. With that fear in mind, I secretly consulted my mom when she came to visit. My mom listened sincerely and told me to let her know if anything happened again. After that, Rick would come with me whenever I went to my in-laws, and I mostly stayed with my mom at home, so I managed to avoid my mother-in-law's harassment. Then I safely gave birth to a baby boy. Holding my little son made all the pain and effort of childbirth seem to disappear. After returning home, my mom helped me with childcare in place of Rick, who was busy with work, so I managed to get used to the new life. Then one day, my mother-in-law suddenly showed up at the house.
Today, I came to bring you a gift for the baby. I heard from an acquaintance about a really good formula, so I bought some for your child.
Thank you. She was smiling the whole time. Since she usually glared at me, it felt creepy.
I hope your baby grows up strong.
As I saw her off, feeling weird that she hadn't said anything snarky, my mom approached, holding my son.
What was she here for?
She gave me some formula. She said she heard from a neighbor that it was good. The moment I took the formula out of the bag, my mom stepped back in shock.
Keep that away.
Huh? What's wrong?
Alyssa, whatever you do, don't open that can of formula.
Saying that, my mom laid my son in his crib and desperately snatched the bag from my hands.
We need to go to the police right now. We have to tell Rick.
Huh? Why? Though surprised, I followed my mom, carrying my son. My mom dashed into the police station where Rick worked.
Rick, this formula is dangerous. Please check it right away.
What on earth is going on?
Alyssa got this formula, but I think it's lime.
Lime? Shocked, I stared into the bag. Rick's face turned serious as he took the formula from us. He and his superior, who had been listening, agreed to analyze the powder. A few days later, it was revealed that the can contained slaked lime used in agriculture. Rick and my mom sat at home with grim expressions.
This lime was used in schools for marking lines back in the day, but some people went blind when it got in their eyes, so it's not used anymore.
Blindness? No way.
Just opening the can and getting it in your eyes could have been dangerous, not just for you, Alyssa, but for the baby too.
I shuddered at the thought of the worst-case scenario. If I hadn't noticed and opened the can or let my son drink it, he would have been in serious trouble by now. My anger exploded at my mother-in-law, who had gone beyond mere harassment and attempted to harm my son. I couldn't allow her behavior to continue any longer. I decided to expose her wrongdoing and get my revenge. A few days after my mother-in-law gave me the formula, I got a call from my father-in-law saying that the police had swarmed their house. He was confused and didn't understand why this was happening, so I went to my in-laws' house with my son in my arms and my mom by my side to explain. When we arrived, my mother-in-law was being restrained by the police, shouting and struggling outside the house.
I haven't done anything. Stop saying nonsense. I'm not going to the police. Let me go.
Oh, Alyssa, Out of nowhere, they suddenly claimed that Michelle was trying to harm you or something like that. And now they're taking her to the station.
My father-in-law looked back and forth between my struggling mother-in-law and us, clearly bewildered. George, what the police are saying is true. We were almost killed by Michelle.
What? What do you mean?
I didn't do anything. Don't believe that woman's lies.
My mother-in-law was shouting, but my father-in-law looked at her with a stern expression.
If the police are involved, there's no way it's nothing. Alyssa, can you tell me what's going on?
Regaining a bit of his composure, I explained everything that had happened to my father-in-law. I believe she intentionally put lime in the formula. Since you have a hobby garden, it wouldn't be unusual for you to buy lime, right?
That's true. I bought lime to spread on the garden. I was going to use it soon, but it seemed like it had decreased. Could it be that you lied and gave this to Alyssa, claiming it was baby formula, Michelle?
My mother-in-law turned pale as my father-in-law's sharp gaze fell on her.
No, I would never do something like that.
Well then, it should be fine if the police investigate, right? If they find fingerprints other than yours, it could indicate who did it.
That.
My mother-in-law broke into a cold sweat and averted her eyes. Now's your chance to confess. If you keep resisting, it might turn into obstruction of justice. Hearing this, my mother-in-law glared at me fiercely.
Fine, I put the lime in. It was just a little prank, right?
A little prank. You're going too far, giving something that can cause blindness in adults and passing it off as baby formula.
You'd notice right away that it wasn't formula, wouldn't you? I didn't think you'd actually let him drink it. If you can't tell the difference between formula and lime, maybe you're unfit to be a mom.
My anger boiled over as she laughed mockingly. Enough. It's one thing to harass me, but what would you have done if something happened to my son? If you hated me that much, you should have opposed the marriage before we got married.
I did oppose it. I said a preschool teacher has no education or income and was just using him, but Rick wouldn't listen and insisted on marrying you.
She shouted, spitting, that she had to protect Rick because he was being deceived by me. She had been harassing us to break us apart, but there was no sign of that happening. It seems she panicked, thinking we wouldn't divorce if we had a child. So she thought threatening the child would make me ask for a divorce. It doesn't mean you can do anything you want, does it? This is a serious crime.
Crime? Don't say something so exaggerated. I'm telling you, it was just a prank.
This is more than just a prank.
Suddenly, Rick's voice came from behind. He had heard about the commotion at his parents' house and came over on his day off. As soon as she saw Rick, my mother-in-law reached out to him desperately.
Rick, please help me. This woman is accusing me and getting me arrested. It's all a misunderstanding. You know the police, right? Convince them.
I'm sorry, but it wasn't Alyssa who accused you. It was me.
What, Rick? Why would you?
Because I thought Alyssa's and our child's lives were in danger.
Rick looked at his mom with sad eyes.
When you gave Alyssa the lime, her mother and she rushed into the police station where I work. I heard about all the harassment, too.
No, I was just being a bit strict.
I've heard enough of those lies. I also heard about the lime. If she had opened the can while holding our son, and the lime dust got into his eyes, it would have been a disaster.
I honestly didn't know that. I thought it was something harmless since it's used in the garden.
Not knowing isn't an excuse. Even though no harm was done, you acted with malice, right? It could be considered attempted murder.
Attempted murder.
My mother-in-law turned pale and covered her mouth.
You've done something that's serious. Please reflect on your actions and make amends.
Wait, I did it for you, Rick. Please drop the charges. We're family. Can't you let this slide?
With tears in her eyes, my mother-in-law clung to Rick. But Rick slowly shook his head.
If I let this go, you won't learn anything, will you? You assumed Alyssa was a bad person without even meeting her when I told you about the wedding and didn't listen.
Rick explained calmly that he had no choice but to report her to the police so that she would change her thinking. But my mother-in-law, unwilling to accept this, clung to Rick's leg and apologized while crying.
How can you say something so cold? Do you know how hard I worked to raise you? You're siding with this woman you've only known for a few years over your own mother. That's too much.
I'm grateful for everything you've done. You worked hard on the housework and drove me to my activities. But your attitude towards Alyssa is wrong. I won't drop the charges.
No, please, I'll change. I won't bother Alyssa anymore. I'll even help with the housework. I'll do anything. So please forgive me.
My mother-in-law started to sob uncontrollably. Still, Rick didn't nod. He just stood there, silently watching her. Seeing that appealing to Rick was futile, my mother-in-law reached out to my father-in-law.
George, please help me. I'm not guilty. Tell the police I'm innocent.
In response to her desperate plea, my father-in-law quietly shook his head.
I've been listening silently, but what you've done is unforgivable. You should properly atone for your crimes.
Why are you siding with that woman too, George? If I get arrested, I won't be able to live here anymore. Didn't we say we would enjoy our retirement, gardening here? Do you want to throw that dream away?
As she said, the neighbors who heard the commotion were watching from afar. If my mother-in-law were taken away, rumors would surely spread. People would gossip, and living here might become impossible. But my father-in-law never nodded.
It's fine if I can't garden anymore. As long as Alyssa and Rick don't have to suffer anymore. That's what matters.
My mother-in-law turned bright red and yelled.
You're prioritizing that woman over your own wife. You must prefer a younger woman. You good-for-nothing traitor.
Listening to her harsh words, my father-in-law let out a sigh.
I never thought you were this mean-spirited. I can't live with you anymore. I'm divorcing you. So go ahead and get arrested.
What? Are you serious? You're kidding, right? We were just fine yesterday. Why is it suddenly coming to a divorce?
My mother-in-law began to panic, and my father-in-law rubbed his temples.
Suddenly, you do these nasty things without feeling any guilt. And when things don't go your way, you lash out at others. That kind of behavior would make 100 years of love disappear in an instant.
But that's because everyone was siding with Alyssa. No one listens to what I say.
We listened, and we still said you were wrong. What you did was bad enough to get you arrested, and claiming it was just a prank isn't gonna cut it.
My father-in-law's forceful tone made my mother-in-law gasp.
I don't want to be with someone who doesn't understand common decency.
Her whole body shook at my father-in-law's words.
Wait, if you leave me, how am I supposed to live? I have no income, and my pension is barely anything. I can't survive. Please, just don't divorce me.
She repeatedly begged, almost like a chant, as she reached out her hand. However, my father-in-law brushed it off coldly. Her makeup had run, leaving her face a mess from tears. She turned to me with that tear-streaked face.
I'm so sorry, Alyssa. It was my fault. I'm apologizing. So please forgive me. If you forgive me, I'm sure Rick and your father-in-law will forgive me too. so please.
You're not really apologizing to me, are you? You're just saying this to get Rick and your father-in-law to forgive you.
That's not true. I'm really sorry. I'll do anything for your forgiveness. Raising a child is hard, right? I'll help out. That'll make things easier, right?
She said this with a forced smile. That smile made me feel sick. I couldn't possibly leave the care of my newborn son to someone who had tried to harm him in such a life-threatening way. I sighed, exasperated by my mother-in-law's complete lack of understanding of my feelings. I'm sorry, but I can't trust you anymore. I don't want to have anything to do with you from now on.
Don't say that. We're family, aren't we?
Family? You never thought of me as family, did you? You've been trying to get me divorced and kicked out of the house this whole time. I could handle your harassment toward me, but I can't consider someone who tried to hurt my son family. I can't forgive you, no matter how much you apologize. Rick gestured to the police. Then the officers grabbed my mother-in-law's arms and were about to take her away in a police car.
No, stop. Don't touch me. Please forgive me, please.
She was still shouting as she was taken away. Afterward, my mother-in-law was arrested for attempted murder. Although we were not physically harmed, the severity and malicious intent of her actions led to a heavy punishment. My father-in-law divorced her, and Rick decided to sever ties with her as well. Now, she's in prison, but we moved to prevent any contact even after she gets out, cutting all communication with her. It seems she had a long history of harassing people she didn't like, so she didn't have a good reputation in the neighborhood. Her arrest only spread this bad reputation, and no one in the neighborhood sided with her. Even when she's released, she'll likely have to live alone without any friends or family to rely on. Since she was a housewife with no income, life will be hard for her after prison. Given her record, it'll be even harder to find a job, especially at her age. Sometimes, I feel sorry for her, but for the sake of my son's safety, I had to harden my heart. Now, my son is at the stage where he's starting to crawl. Seeing him grow up healthy, I feel relieved that we cut ties with my mother-in-law. I made a vow to keep protecting my son so that he can continue growing up healthy and happy.